Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Game Hub. I'm your host Gamer K, and it's time for the final video of September. And it's a video I've been dreading doing since last year. I was planning on doing it, but then other ideas came up, more ideas came in, so it kind of got away from me. And I've been dreading doing this list too, so it's not a fun list I enjoy doing. I enjoy doing it a little bit, but it's also a pain to get through. My very first video here on the Game Hub was my top 13 favorite video game villains, and I tried to do as much as I can to keep it video game oriented, so no different versions of already existing villains were on the list, and I did the same thing here. Was it a challenge? Yes! Recalling all these terrible villains? Not so much fun! So, let's dive right in, ladies and gentlemen. These are Gamer K's top 13 worst video game villains. Why top 13? Because here, only the odd can become number one. Now, a couple rules, like I normally do for a top 13 list. Rule 1, one villain per franchise. So you won't see any multiple villains from the same series on this list, although a good majority of them definitely belong on this list. What else? What other rules? Oh, right. I try to do them video game oriented only, as best as I can. So that would mean no Batman villains, no Kingdom Hearts, no Disney Kingdom Hearts villains. So Pete and Maleficent are out. Basically, yeah, those are pretty much the only rules. Let's get down right to it. Coming at number 13, Pokemon has had... Oh, I actually have a Pokemon entry and my lovely ghastly Gengar mech art print here. Pokemon has definitely had their fair share of villains, and a good majority of them kind of had the same thing. World domination through Pokemon. We had Team Rocket, we had Team Aqua and Magma, we had Team Galactica. And then... Oh, by the way, I'm just going to say this. Team Skull, not on this list, because I find them to be very hilarious and actually pretty cool. Team Flare, on the other hand, not so much. Like, they're basic, they're bland, they're a flare, more like a little spark that doesn't ignite much. And I can't really have a whole group of guys on the list, so Lysander. Yeah. Definitely not the best written of the Pokemon villains, if any. For one thing, it's easy to spot them because they literally stick out like a blistered thumb. Always using fire types or dark types. So basically this is Diet Team Magma on a budget. Self-sustaining. That's what they are. They use basically the exact same tactics as Team Magma, just not to a good effect. And also, Lysander is by far the weakest villain on this list. He's on the bottom of the list because he doesn't... I mean, his boss battle is being used very, very loosely. You fight him once, and like near the end of the story section, and it's easy. But then for some reason, putting on very technological goggles and helicopter arms for some reason make you stronger. And also gives his Gyarados the Mega Stone. Oh, that's going to be another rule. Just because a boss battle is bad doesn't necessarily mean the villain is bad. I mean, bad villains can have good boss battles, and good villains can have bad boss battles. But I'll get to that when I do. So Lysander, yeah, you're basically the world's lamest villain in Pokemon. For the main fact, is that your big plan is to nuke the world. I'm going to pause for Pokemon fans to think this through. Gotta catch them all. No, you just gotta nuke them all, and then that's it. Coming in at number 12, Mario and Luigi have had their fair share of enemies outside of Bowser. There's my favorite guy, Fawful. Hey! Hey! Sorry, I just love doing Fawful's sound effects. Phantasma from Dreamy Luigi was pretty fun. He was a very cool villain, how they had him. But you know what? I'm done with talking about the good ones. Let's get down to the worst one. The Shroobs! If any chance Mario didn't need an alien invasion of purple mushrooms, yeah, partners in time, you will definitely find a horde of stupidity. Mostly for the dumb plot twist in the end. Oh, that's another thing. For a good majority of these villains, spoiler, sorry for the being late on that, but now you're warned. Technically, okay, so in the game, we get this drawing that shows Princess Peach using the star on the Princess Shroob. And then it's shown later in the game that we just draw off the dust to reveal there's another princess in the corner. And me playing this for the first time, I was confused, and then after beating the Princess Shroob, which was one of the worst boss battles I will ever have to deal with, yeah, it turns out we've been collecting the star thinking it will stop the Shroobs, when in fact it releases the Elder Princess Shroob. And boy, is that a terrible villain. I mean, yeah, we just freed the main boss of the Shroobs, and okay, yeah, the boss battle was pretty intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. But coming in that late in the story and then going to that final boss battle without any development for her to be the villain, it's kind of a wasted opportunity. I mean, at least with the Dark Star in Bowser's Inside Story, after we defeated it inside of Bowser, it became Dark Bowser and had a little opportunity to enjoy being free and full of life. The Elder Princess Shroob is definitely on this list because of her lack of potential for the game. That's plain and simple right there. Coming at number 11, L.A. Noire will by far be one of my favorite detective games to date. But I really wish there was more of them. However, I do wish that villains in this game were a little bit more developed and not so flip-floppy. Like, okay, so here's the villain of this section. Here's the villain of this story. There's no concise villain throughout the game until you get to the arson desk cases, and then you realize there's been a big conspiracy going throughout the game. Start to unravel during the Vice cases. Harlan Fontaine is definitely who I would consider a villain in the making. I mean, throughout the game, we find the newspapers that kind of reveal backstory on what's been going on behind the scenes throughout the game. And Harlan Fontaine is definitely the main focus there. He's a psychiatrist, he's a medical doctor, he gives lectures in his spare time, and also collaborating with a whole bunch of other people in town in order to make a huge profit. And also, he's a master manipulator and a murderer and a drug dealer. So basically, he's a whole bunch of everything fit into one neatly tight, suited package. Unfortunately, he's never the main villain for long because, he's killed in the final case by a monster of his own making. Not going to say much about the dead old Doc, but at least he gave me a good... at least he kept me guessing what his big role was going to be throughout the game. So, yeah, L.A. Noire, great game. Not so good villains. Next up. At number 10, Fairly Odd Parents video games. I know what you're going to say. I said no villains that were based on TV shows or anything like that. But technically this doesn't count because this is the only time the character ever appears in the game. Breaking the Rules definitely was a great game. And the sequel, well, next game, Showdown, taking you on a great big new adventure in the Fairly Odd Parents world. And I'm going to say this, the main villain, the Chamberlain Shadow. Basically, the Chamberlain of the Fairy King and Queen, he wanted to split his shadow from him so he can best serve his masters. So he used the magic jewel to slice off his shadow, which evidently the shadow was evil. So the shadow decided to use the royal jewel to make shadows rule their masters. Not a bad plan, except for this was supposed to be a big reveal villain. And there's two problems with that. One. Okay, I'm just going to, calmly as I can explain why there's a problem with this villain. I mean, is it his boss fight? Somewhat. I mean, all you do is fight him in the center of the area, stomp some lights on him, and then ground pound his foot a good number of times. So, boss battle's not that good. So, two other things that make this boss battle a very bad video game villain. For one thing, this was supposed to be a surprise villain. Like a big reveal for the end of the level. The end of the game. So, I'm going to say this. Whoever did the detailing for the cover of the game is a big freaking moron. Because you put the main villain on the cover! Literally, on the cover of the game, you will see behind Timmy, Cosmo, Wanda, the Shadow! And that brings me to my second point. The game is called Shadow Showdown! How do you have that be the big reveal when on the cover and in the title, you basically say, this is the villain, ladies and gentlemen, and you practically say it in your cover? Get a clue, you idiots, get a clue! Yeah, so, bad boss battle, keeping the villain under wraps till the end, and definitely, yeah, that's basically why he's on this list as a bad villain. Coming at number 9, oh boy, Sly Cooper series. Great series. Until you get to the third game, where there's not that much in terms of boss fights. I mean, General Sao was a very good boss fight. But Dr. M from Sly Cooper, Honor Among Thieves, is definitely the weakest villain in the whole series. For the main thing, he's the main focus as he's trying to get to the fortune that's in the Cooper vault. Basically because he was the brains of Sly's father's team, and he felt like his genius was being underappreciated. So many years later, after Cooper's death, he decides to break into the vault, which takes him all game to do because he doesn't have Cooper's cane, which is the master key. I mean, you think for a story like that, he would be, hiring people to make sure we don't get to him, But no, instead, we are scouring the globe to first get our original team back, and then finding other people to help us. So basically, the main villain is just a sidestep. I mean, he could have hired all these bad guys that we fight in the game in order to stop us from getting to him. But no, we have to fight them just because we have to fight them because they're causing problems in where we are. Very, very convenient. So we're fighting an opera lion, a woman mouse who's pretending to be a flying ace, a pirate parrot, an ancient mask, just for the sake of having boss fights. No wonder the third of everything is usually bad. Except for Back to the Future and Rush Hour. Those ones are great. Coming in at number 8, Grand Theft Auto 5 definitely had its share of really cool villains. I mean, for God's sake, Devin Weston was my number 1 pick for my best villains list because he was a representation of a modern-day a-hole. And number 8 is a representation of a underrated a-hole. Harold Stretch Joseph. Yeah. Why? Why was this guy considered a villain? We see him like once during the main game. We call him 3 times after he screws Franklin over. And then in the end, because he's a loose end and a nuisance, we have to kill him. If they had, like, Stretch have a more prominent role in the game, like throughout some of the side missions or main missions with Franklin, I would have he wouldn't have been on this list. Steve Haynes was originally going to be on this list, but Stretch beat him out because of the way you kill him with Michael is kind of a letdown. You have to use a melee weapon, which means you gotta get in close to kill him for the gold medal. Yeah. Not only that, but Stretch was an okay villain. I mean, we find out later that he's been trying to screw us over ever since he got out, so yeah, he's still not that great of a villain. So let's move on. Coming at number 7, the Sherlock Holmes games have definitely been an underrated classic for me. From the PC ones, which I never played, to the console ones, which 2 of them I played. And in The Devil's Daughter, there's definitely more of a story going on within the confines of the cases that you play throughout the game. Alice Hamilton is a terrible villain. Supposed to be a surprise villain, and yet throughout like the first 2 cases, she indicates that she's up to something. So kudos on keeping the surprise, guys. So it turns out that she is the daughter of a guy either a serial killer or a criminal that Sherlock put away years back. And also, this woman is nuts. She believes in witchcraft, and she was trying to get in the good graces of Sherlock's daughter. For those of you who don't know, his adoptive daughter that he took in after he killed Moriarty. And she doesn't know this, but Alice tells her that she's the daughter of one of the greatest criminal masterminds of all time. And I guess decides to either to try to kill her on a boat so they can live together in the afterlife. Yeah, Alice doesn't make that prominent role as a villain. More of a final area nuisance again. Also, she sleeps in the crypt where Moriarty is. Oh no, wait, I think that's what happens. And she also sleeps down there with her father's corpse. and you think Jason, and you think Bateman, and you thought Norman Bates had parent issues. Yeah, this chick gives him a run for his money. Coming in at number 6. Does anyone really remember Lollipop Chainsaw? I mean, cosplayers sure do. And the boss battles were pretty good in that game. Very good, in fact. My favorite was Josie with that psychedelic... Okay, not psychedelic. That disco era. And it was so cool. Sadly, the main villain, Swan, it was a letdown. Basically, he's a gothic geek bastard who releases zombies into the world in order to get revenge on society for treating him like an outsider. So he releases the 5 Dark Purveyors, which are based on 5 types of eras and music. We have heavy metal, we've got Viking metal, we've got the psychedelic era for some reason, we get disco, and we get rock and roll. After they've all died, Swan shoots his head off and becomes Killabilly, which looks like Elvis after he's been decayed for centuries. Why Swan is on this list, and I don't think any of you really remember him, is because there was potential here. I mean, the reason he became a villain is because he liked Juliet, and her boyfriend picked on him a lot. So, high school drama destroys the world? Oh, dear God. There was so much potential for him. Like, I watched that game numerous times and thought of so many ways, like, Swan could appear. I mean, he only appears in the first section and the last section. That's it. I mean, if he were to pop in now and then in each level and taunts Juliet as she's going through the levels, and I don't know, had him have his own boss fight before he shoots his head off, I mean, back to the drawing board? I mean, like, this just proves that just because a boss... You know what? Nah, I'm done with this. I'm done with Swan. Next. Coming at number 5, ladies and gentlemen. Who remembers Sam and Max? Anyone? Anyone? Wisecracking dog detective with his psychotic rabbit best friend. And he's not a rabbit. He's a short, sexy lagomorph with dead shark-like eyes and a big mouth. Sam and Max was definitely a really cool series. Having 3 different series. It was season 2, on the other hand, that really gets the villain here on the list. So, these villains came right out of nowhere. And even now, I'm starting to think what their real motive was, because in the first game they got pushed around a lot. But it was until episode 5, What's Up Beelzebub, where after we ruin the personal hells of all of our friends, Satan says that his bosses aren't going to like what happened. So then Max says, who could be as evil and hated as the devil? The Soda Poppers. Literally, this comes right out of nowhere. Picking on them throughout the first episode, was fun. Oh, dear Lord. So basically, the Soda Poppers, after being hypnotized in the first season and beating Brady Culture to death, they decide to become something worse than former TV show kids. Managers of hell! Well, Luckily, no one from Disney Channel has figured that out yet. And so their plans went from politics, becoming stars on a on a competition show, and for some reason, us ruining their birthday, they decided to become the managers of hell, where they set it out to recreate the first 3 sins. I gotta admit, it was terrifying seeing these 3 idiots become evil. And it was definitely more hilarious to see them go to defeat them. I'm just so glad they didn't reappear in Season 3, because I would have literally thrown my remote across the room. Well, this just proves that even former TV stars can become evil one day. Let's get to next. Number 4, Smash Bros. Who doesn't love Smash Bros? Smash Bros. Brawl, on the other hand, was really good. Except for Taboo. What the literal hell was this? I mean, Ganondorf thought he was working for Master Hand, and then it turns out that he was being controlled by Taboo, which looks like Electro from Shattered Dimensions, just a light blue color. So, and because there's no dialogue in the game, you know nothing about Taboo. He just appears near the end of the game, turns all the characters into trophies, and then takes all the spaces that was destroyed with the dark bombs and creates his own maze. And because of this, we don't know his motivations. We don't know what his goals are. We know nothing about him. Although the boss battle was pretty cool with his attacks. But that's the only cool thing about him, his attacks. Nothing about Taboo speaks. Wow. This was a great plot twist. Yeah, a good majority of these bosses are kind of plot twists, aren't they? You think I have a thing for plot twists? Probably. Well, that's all I can say about Taboo, because unlike the other villains, I can't really say that much about him. So, let's get to it. We're at the top 3, ladies and gentlemen. So, the top 3. So, what could top boring boss battles, lame villain schemes, and basically just being overall unenjoyable? Well, these top 3 bosses do 3 things. 1, predictable as hell. Downright disturbing and not being as involved as advertised. Coming in at number 3, the Back to the Future, the video game. One of my favorite games from Telltale. It was definitely before they did the choice-making game. So this was, again, a point-and-click RPG, pretty much. And it was fun. Every single level was a unique twist on a new adventure for Doc and Marty. Also, while investigating the Speakeasy Arsonist, which was supposed to be another great reveal, ladies and gentlemen, but here's the problem. I know what these types of games tend to do. So, and after a good number of episodes, you start to put the facts together. You start to think about what characters said, what happened. Like, what did they say to kind of make you think that they were the villain? It starts to stew in your head as you keep playing and keep playing. And then it's not until near the final episode where you think, I know who did it. Edna Strickland, on the other hand, is not one of those villains. Right from the get-go, I figured out she was going to be the arsonist. How, you may ask? And no, I didn't look it up on YouTube. I actually figured it out in the first episode of the game. Yeah. How, you may ask? Well, a good number of things pointed to this, and this is where my detective instincts got the better of me. For one thing, the reason we knew what time Doc was in, was because Einstein had a shoe in the DeLorean when he came into the first episode, so that's what started the adventure. And it brought us to an old Edna Strickland, and seeing that she's a very big stickler for the rules and for being a good person. Let's just say she's an overdone zealot without the religious aspect. That's pretty much what she is. So the fact that Einstein had her shoe was hint number one. Hint number two, during the Speakeasy arsonist in 1940s, I think it was. Maybe the 1940s, if I'm remembering the time era right. Considering she was constantly speaking about booze being debauchery and evil, that was hint two. Hint three, every time Einstein was around her, he would growl and bark. And considering Doc saying Einstein wouldn't attack someone without good reason, and because Doc was in prison for being suspected of being the arsonist, and for him being knocked out, and that's why he got arrested, led me to believe she was the arsonist, because she constantly talks about the evils of alcohol, saying that it was a righteous thing that the speakeasies went up in flames. And also, Einstein attacked her and had her slipper, indicating she did something to deserve it. So, yeah, didn't take me 5 episodes to figure it out. It took me episode 1. And, oh dear God, her actions in future episodes definitely made her more of a villain. But the fact that I figured the big plot twist in episode 1 seems to think, I mean, if I could do it, definitely a whole bunch of other people who aren't brain dead. But yeah, it was definitely a good game to go through. Having her as the villain, not so much. Comment number 2. Okay. This villain is actually okay, but it's on here for being downright disturbing and downright all-around creepy. And for one more reason, Alice Madness Returns was an amazing sequel to the American McGee's Alice series. And I'm hoping that they do another game. But if I could just put one little hint for what they could do to make it better than the last game, I'm just going to say one thing. I'm just going to say one little thing. Boss battles! Do boss battles! Dr. Bumby, a.k.a. Dollmaker, is number 2. This guy was the villain from the start of the game in more ways than one. We find out, we kind of figure out as the story progresses, as Alice recalls memories of the night of the fire that killed her parents and her sister. We find out that this is the third doctor that's on here, and he's definitely creepy. For one thing, we find out that he was the one who started the fire, intending to kill the entire little family, mostly because he was trying to make advances on Lizzie, Alice's older sister, and she told her father, and what happened was he went into their house, and I don't like talking about this topic as much as it happens, but he, for lack of a better word, assaulted Lizzie and suffocated her and killed her. Yeah. Strike one, Doctor. Secondly, he burned the house down to cover his tracks. Strike two. And then strike three, after Alice got out of the asylum, he was her psychiatrist trying to make her forget the event, so she wouldn't remember what she saw. And oh dear Lord, it was terrifying. But here's the worst part about him that makes him even creepier. Not only is he trying to corrupt Alice's mind by making... I mean, he's the reason the Infernal Train, the main threat in the game, exists. He's the doll maker in Wonderland. And what he does... And the dollhouse level is disturbing. And if you can read psychological imagery in the level, you know exactly what he's been doing. He warps the mind of young orphans and sells them on the street for sex work. He robs children of their innocence in order to turn them into dolls. Yeah. That's what gets him on this list, and then some, just for being the most so downright disturbing. He's not a terrible bot. He's not a terrible villain. He's just a disturbing one. And this is by far the creepiest thing I've ever had to review. And then being the only boss battle in the game and having it be kind of easy, just shooting his hands and his beard. Although, I gotta admit, seeing him get what he deserves in the end of the game, let's just say he had a train to catch. That's all I gotta say on that. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we reached the number one. So, what could be worse than predictable villain, not having that much of a role, not being so prominent? How about not being as advertised? Gamer K's number one worst villain in video games is Dermot Lucky Quinn from Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most poorly advertised games that was supposed to make us love this game. And as they released each character, like Iraq, Lucky Quinn, Damien, Lucky is definitely the one that is the worst. We meet him in the start of the tutorial levels, and we see him kill his messenger. And then we see him later at the slave auction. And then that goes away really quick. And then it turns out he's the one who hired the hit out on Damien and Aiden, which in result ended in the death of Aiden's niece, all because we hacked into a hotel in order to steal money, and we found a file Lucky was using on a politician that he murdered a woman in his room. For being the main villain and for being so unused in the game, that's why Lucky is definitely here, because there were so much more possibilities could have been done. He could have... Okay, you know what? I can't really think of anything because it's so on the spot. But they could have done more with him instead of having Damien being the main villain. I mean, it was just underdone. I'm guessing not that much thought went into it, because we spent most of the chapters focusing on Iraq and not so much on Lucky. Luckily, his death scene wasn't that memorable, and much like everything in Watch Dogs 1, the motivation is very weak at best. So yeah, a terrible mob boss ends up being the terrible boss for video games. And that's my list, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining in. Like, comment, subscribe down below. And coming next month, it's Villains Month. I'm saying that because throughout October, the entire all videos will be villain themed, except for the last one for week 4. So, what's coming next week? Well, let's start off this spooky season with some... Let's go for some very fun villains. Let's go down to Disney as their Rogues Gallery comes up on my list. This is Gamer K, logging out.